Wood for Monday, March the 8th, 2021. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bowen,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano, Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni, Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Eden,
Here.
Councilmember Remy,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember Galani, Councilmember McCune, Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
All right, welcome. And it is good to see so many of you in the council chambers this evening. All right, before we get to action items, we have 10 informational items. Is there anything under information that any member of the council would like to discuss before we go into our work session? Action items. All right, seeing none, moving into action items. The first we have is strategic planning. And thanks all of you for making time to be here early this evening. So Mr. Cross, our interim city administrator, previously provided everyone with a summary of all of the work, and we did a lot at the last council meeting relative to prioritization of sub-goals and combining some of those and renaming some of those. So before we get to the real part of tonight's discussion, I wanted to see if anyone had any material comments on that document. Councilor McCutcheon.
So I noticed that the pedestrian trail along Green Pines Park and Villages of Brightleaf is under enhanced green space, but there's also a trail and park improvement, like under public works, public safety. So which one does that really go under?
Okay, can you give us those two again, please?
On the enhanced green space, the last item is new pedestrian trail along Green Pines Park in the Villages of Brightleaf, but under public works, there's also trail and park improvements. So I think they should all go together.
What line 9 in enhanced green space, is that correct, Councilmember?
Yes,
And what line is it within
so under public works and public safety,
yeah, what line?
number 22 and 24, it's under trail and park improvement.
I think, I mean, my initial impression of that is it would fit better under public, where the other items are under trail and park improvement. Was that your thought?
That's my thought, yes. Do I need to make a motion?
Objection to moving that by any member of the council? Councilmember Garitano?
Just a correction on that item that Councilmember
McCutcheon raised it. It says wards 4, 5, 7, and 8. I think that's just in Ward 5, right, Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes, it's only in 5.
We'll make that correction and it will be moved.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Councilmember Clark?
I had a few comments. Should I just go through all of them? You want me to go one at a time?
Well, are they about moving the order of anything on the list, or?
They're all in order on the list. One of them was that we have some things that have a heading, a category, and it would be more consistent if we had everything under categories. instead of just some things. So for example, erosion control, we have a flood mitigation. If we had everything categorized,
So that's something I would suggest we handle in the final phase 3, where we're fine tuning and basically getting it in final form. At this point, for continuation of the discussion, all I think we need to, or the only thing I'm worried about at this point is whether there are any material objections to any of the sub-items and where they're located. But in terms of identifying additional subtopics, I think we can do that in the last phase.
okay,
And I'm afraid if we get into that tonight, we're not going to get to what we need to get to, which is the money.
okay, I understand. One under erosion control says evaluate the ditches and erosion issues. Maybe this is a fine tuning also, but is there something else we were going to do with that other than evaluate?
I think we talked, I don't think we had any. It would depend probably on what that evaluation is, because by definition, if we need to evaluate it to know what's going on, I don't know that we have anything further to put there at this juncture. But
Okay. Okay, maybe all of the things that I have would be under just fine tuning.
okay. All right, we'll save them because you're going to get an opportunity to tweak the final product here sooner than you think, I hope. Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, I have one that is under
Next to last one, number 8, enhance pedestrian safety, lighting on trails. That should go up under Public Works, Public Safety, under safety issues.
Where is that again? I'm sorry.
It's on enhanced green space. It's number 8,
Yes.
and it should go up under safety issues under Public Works.
That would seem to make sense. Any objection to that? All right, seeing no objection, that'll be moved. Anything further in terms of substantive comments on the sub-goals for their priority? All right. Thank you for the comments. Seeing none, that gets us to the fun part. The money. And in hopes of facilitating your discussion of this, I put a memo together, some of which I had previously written when we started this. I just kind of cut and pasted from it. But it is the part of that earlier memo when it started that relates to the funding. And that is attached. So I mentioned the highlights of this in my mayor's report Friday to you. And then, of course, the memo was attached to your materials tonight. And at the end of the day, I thought it would be helpful if we segregated what I call the 3 extraordinary items apart from the other things, as I see them, at least in the strategic plan goals that have been developed up to this point, the 8 goals. So in other words, to me, public works projects is something that's not particularly extraordinary. We do that, all the time. It's one of our core functions. The 3, what I would call extraordinary expenses potentially would be internet access, watershed erosion. That's internet access is goal 1, watershed erosion goal 3, and Lake Chesterfield, which is goal 4. So before I go on, is everyone in agreement that those 3 compared to the others would be extraordinary expense for someone? We're not saying who's going to do it yet. We're just talking about extraordinary expense. Councilmember Dunn.
I guess my question is on the Lake Chesterfield goal. I know that could be a public safety issue, but I think it's been driven by more of an aesthetic issue. And I don't know how much of an emergency it is. I'm just asking the question.
Great question. At this point, and Joe Benich, or anyone else for that matter, feel free to step in if I state this incorrectly, but as you may recall, the city did fund some testing of the bridge, Pierside Lane. And at this juncture, there is no safety issue presented by that, by the leakage in and around that bridge. Now, that being said, it is possible that if funds from somewhere are procured, and for example, the lake is infilled in the northern one third of it, that basically takes care of, according to geophysical surveying, virtually all of the leaks of consequence, then that would buttress the safety, of the bridge. But at the moment, there is no core safety issue with respect to Lake Chesterfield. And so I would agree that I don't think it's an emergency on an exigent basis at this juncture, and is more of the aesthetic aspect, property value, than it is on the safety side of things.
Well, and I went by there this past weekend, and it's a beautiful lake again, just looks fine. And I'm wondering what kind of costs the residents of that particular area. I know we did say that the roadway is our responsibility, but the aesthetics, I'm not trying to throw everything on them.
The council's gonna be wrestling with that momentarily.
Okay, I'll be quiet.
That very issue. All right. So there's agreement, it sounds, Councilmember Brose.
I believe all three are extraordinary. I think internet is the one that would, should be a one and done if we do it right, and we will do it right. I believe the erosion is extraordinary, but I think it's also ongoing. I don't think we're going to have a 3-year plan to address all the erosion and then it's going to be settled. We're going to continue to have environmental issues that are going to cause it. So I think the erosion is something that we should always focus on. I don't think it should go away.
All right. So with respect to the three, and thank you for the comments and questions, with respect to the three, as I noted in the memo, and so that's the focus for the next leg of this discussion, only those three. Okay. And relative to those, as I point out in the memo that I provided to you, there are essentially three possibilities relative to the funding. And we have our Joe and others on our, Joe Vinich and others on our team who can refresh our recollection, as they probably will momentarily, as to what the likely cost is for these three in the near term and in the long term. The three options that are available relative to funding are, and again, these are three or any combination of the three in some cases. The city provides no funding. For example, the funding could come from residents affected by the issue through the formation of a community improvement district or a neighborhood improvement district, which is similar to a subdivision that many of us are part of, that assesses its members for road maintenance. A CID or a NID can issue bonds, just like a city can, and so forth, and we'll come to that shortly. So that's one option. The city provides no funding, it comes from another source. That's one option relative to another source. Option two would be the city provides some funding, and that could be either with or without a community improvement district or funding by any other source. And third of the options for funding is that the city provides no funding. It all comes from another source. So I thought what would be helpful, if there's no objection to facilitating the discussion of the council, is to ask you, and this is an informal poll. In other words, you're free to change your mind as the discussion proceeds, but I'm assuming, knowing all of you and the preparedness that you have already put in on these items, that you have likely at least formed a tentative, not for sure final, but a tentative view as to each of these three extraordinary items: internet access, watershed erosion, and Lake Chesterfield, what your thoughts are relative to the funding of those. And of the two or so informal polls that I'd like to take so that the group is making this decision going forward is whether you would like to have the discussion of funding for each of those three. One at a time, we discuss internet access funding. Then we discuss in order of the goals, to be fair, watershed erosion funding, and then Lake Chesterfield, or whether you would like the discussion to occur as to all of them collectively or two of them collectively. So that's my first question. Do you want the discussion that we're about to have on funding to occur as to one of them only? And we're going to poll the council here in just a second. Or all of them? Or two of them? And if so, which two? And whatever you decide is the way we're going to go. Could you please call the roll? So just say individual, one at a time, or all of them, or here are my two. Go ahead.
Councilmember Garitano. Okay. Councilmember Flasher.
Individual.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Individual.
Councilmember Bertolino.
All of them.
Councilmember Dodwell.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear Councilor Bertolini.
You said all of them.
Okay.
Councilmember Dodd.
Individually.
Councilmember Nyan.
Individual.
Councilmember Bartoni. She's not here. Councilmember Bros.
All of them?
Councilmember Clark.
Individually.
Councilmember Edens.
Individually.
Councilmember Remy.
All of them.
Councilmember Farmer.
All of them.
Councilmember Galani. Councilmember McCune.
Individually.
Councilmember Rambo.
Individually.
Councilmember McCutcheon. Councilmember Garitano.
Gotta go an individual.
Okay, so the winner is one at a time, individual. All right. So we're going to take the first one, which is internet access. And my next question, which again is an informal poll, you're not bound by it. We're going to take a vote momentarily, so you're not bound by this at this point. Question is, at this juncture, do you think funding for internet access, and before you answer that, actually, I'll finish my sentence. What I'm going to ask you is, should it be of the three options? One, the city doesn't provide any. Two, the city provides some. And of course, then we get to how much of some. Or three, the city provides all. Those are the three options. Okay. All, some, or none. Before we do the informal poll, Joe Vinich, I know that you gave us a number previously. Based on where things stand today, the total number in your best estimation to successfully get us where we want to be relative to relative to internet access in the city, can you please give us what that number would be?
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, we received three proposals from three different companies, and the cost would range from $4.5 million to $10 million. The $10 million number reflects a city-wide installation of fiber to the home.
And a 4.5 reflects what?
Just to the rural areas, primarily west of Route 109, and then pockets in the northeast and southeast quadrants of the city.
Okay. And then one question I have, which I suspect is going to be asked, relative to the citywide 10 million approach, what would be the mechanism to assure for viability of that approach that it would in fact be citywide with subscribers, as opposed to rolling that out at that expense and avoiding what I'm assuming would end up being a problem with not the number of residents in currently served areas subscribing as we would have originally anticipated?
CTC, Technology and Energy, has always emphasized that if a citywide rollout of fiber to the premise was proposed, key amongst, and the first step would be a solid agreement between the city and the provider. Secondly, the Rural Internet Access Committee always suggested that a citywide rollout would start with those that have no service or underserved. And then finally, we would require the city, being we, some type of performance bond, so that if the company did fail to complete per the agreement, we could have funding to proceed forward with another provider.
Okay, and presumably as a business it would be a business proposition and financial decision rather for our residents, they would need to be competitively priced with competitive services and products.
And to let the cat out of the bag, this particular provider can far exceed what is available from any of the current providers in terms of speeds, both upload and download, and they can actually offer it all for a lesser price.
Okay. All right. So with that, the question on internet access, and again, informal poll, we're taking these one at a time for the council's decision. The three options, as you sit here at this moment without anything further, no motion has been made yet. The question is, do you think the city should provide no funding, some funding, or all funding for internet access for either of the 4.5 or the 10 mil? And we're going to talk about those in a moment. Councilmember Rambo.
The city providing some of the funding, is that or does that include potential taxes and bond issues and so forth? Is that still city provided funding, or is that the hybrid approach?
The issue of how the city would provide funding is set forth in, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's a good thing to consider before you give even an informal answer. If you go to page 2 of the memo, and this is in your, that I did, and this is in your materials, the second section of that memo, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, fourth section of that memo is titled Determination of Specific Approach with City Funding. And there are 8 options that could occur with respect to that, and I'll just go through these. And this is with all or some city funding. And it may be a combination of some of these 8. 1, obtain increased income through pursuing budget neutral events and programs. We have a committee of our 3 standing committee chairs who are currently looking at that, I believe getting to a point of making final recommendation. And we're probably, Councilmember Garetano, can you give us as the chair of that, just a rough idea of what your ballpark thoughts are, or thought is relative to how much we might be able to save in that regard?
Sure, and the work is still in progress, so I'll preface that by saying it's not final, and I'll ask Mr. Vunich just to also correct me if I misstate a number, but I believe that we have looked at existing program events and identified some good opportunities where either because of low attendance or of registration fees not being at parity with similar other events. These are just some of the examples. I believe the figure was that about 200,000, Mr. Vunich. You may recall better. That's assuming same attendance as we've seen. Or go ahead, Joe.
Mr. Garetano, my recollection was by adding fees along with increasing registration requirements and then eliminating certain low attendance events, I think we were closer to about $75,000.
So, okay, I'm thinking of a different figure. I thought it was a lot higher than that. So obviously, then I'll have to go back to my records.
Well, if it's any consolation, Councilmember Garetano, we liked your answer better than Mr. Vunich's, but that's okay.
Well, we'll keep working at it.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, we will. So that's one option. Thank you for that information. Option 2, if the city provides funding, is reallocating existing funds from current programs and things that we might want to choose to spend it on internet access instead of that. Option 3 would be to obtain, to the extent they're available, federal, state, local grants. And I think at the moment, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably not an option with respect to internet access. Is that your understanding?
Well, for many years, it has been, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, but we are waiting to hear back from CTC about this new program that came out of one of the COVID-19 relief bills from the United States Congress. Joanne Hovis, the owner of CTC Technology and Energy, had promised us an answer the first part of March.
Okay.
Hopefully I'll have some good news.
Hopefully. All right. The other option, again, if the city provides funds, is the city could issue bonds, just like a community improvement district could. Number 5, there could be a sales tax that could be applied, or a park tax. 6 would be to increase the existing utility tax. So 5 is actually a stormwater or a park tax. 7 is would be a sales tax, and 8 would be a real estate tax. We are one of the cities in the county that does not have a real estate tax. But if the way I was planning to go forward with this, so again, the 3 items: the city as to internet access, city provides no funding, option 1. Option 2, city provides some funding. Option 3, city provides no funding. If the council decides it's 2 or 3, some or all, in other words, then we get to the discussion of your question, Councilmember Rambo, which is where that's going to come from. So just initially, it is the informal poll to get the discussion going. Does the council believe, as to internet access, that city should provide some, all, or none of the funding? If the city provides any funding, these are the 8 ways from which it could come, or a combination of those.
We didn't contemplate our reserves as another example of city provided funds.
I would classify, it's not in here in that word, but I would classify that as another program type thing, because I mean, but that is an option. Councilmember Galani.
All right. I know we discussed this briefly a while back when we first started this whole strategic planning process, but regarding the rural internet access, I know there's been some significant additional developments with SpaceX's Starlink availability and plans for later this year and next year. That they're talking about having it available to most of the globe by the end of this year and to the entire globe by early next year, and speeds of 300 megabits per second and 20 millisecond latency. So with that being said, I mean, is that something that we might want to potentially entertain when we're looking at a $4.5 to $10 million investment, whether it's partially city funded or all city funded or non-city funded? And to my understanding, when we talked about this previously, I think there was a multi-year time horizon to get this whole fiber plan implemented and put out there. So I think, so with that being said, I mean, are we putting the cart before the horse to where this problem might be in the process of potentially being solved on its own without this massive investment or planning on the city's purpose?
Joe Benich, do you have any information relative to that question?
Well, certainly the department's been aware of Starlink and the progress it's been making in terms of beta testing. Under the beta testing, I've heard mixed results, issues with the signal being dropped, some latency problems, but they've been explained by Starlink in that the whole system of satellites has not yet been deployed as you described, Councilmember Giuliani. And so they're counting on, when the system is deployed to its fullest extent, that those things will be minimized or go away. The rationale for fiber to the premise is that it provides the highest speeds, and according to our consultant, was future-proof. So kind of going with that thought of Councilmember Brost, one and done, that was kind of what fiber to the premise was about.
And one thing I would say relative to, not necessarily, I guess in part, Councilor Galani's question, but also the broader issue of rural internet. You know, it's really going to come down to a judgment call on the part of the council relative to risk. There is risk in doing something, particularly with city funds, because as Councilor Galani's comment or his question mentioned, this does involve technology that changes fairly rapidly. It could involve a business plan that, while we can contractually require CTC or whomever we end up doing something with, if we do, to do certain things, they may not do it and so forth. So there's risk on that side, but there's also risk in not doing anything, which is those technologies may not develop. CTC might do a terrific job, and we continue with our residents not having internet access. And that is just a decision that this council has to wrestle with. That's why you're here, and you make that decision, that there's risk on both sides with this, I think. Okay. So relative to internet access, I'm sorry, Councilmember Edens.
My question's for Director Vunich, because I just want to make sure that I understand two things. When we are looking at all of the funding, that include the individual drop line. Will the homeowner be responsible for the drop line, or is that rolled into the quote, all of the funding?
Is my understanding cost will be inclusive to the dwelling. Once at the dwelling, that's the installation charge for the property owner or homeowner.
Oh, okay. So the installation charge is nominal, the drop line is included, and just, I don't think this is a closed session question, but stop me if it is. But all of these, I mean, these proposals, we do not own the backbone, nor are we receiving a rent from the companies. Is that correct?
I think that remains to be seen.
Okay.
Joe, is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's part of the negotiation. And I will add that Charter Spectrum was the only one that said, if the drop from the main line to the dwelling was over a certain distance, they would charge a fee given that distance. But as I say, the others were did not require the same.
Okay, it's just something we should revisit because it would affect a future decision that goes beyond just this top level, non-detailed discussion. Thank you.
Councilor Remy.
Yeah, just a point of clarification, Mayor Boland. So when you were referring to the different aid or ways to pay for these things, you were referring to all of the projects, not just this project, I would assume, just because stormwater and parks can't be applied for rural internet, although there may be indirect savings by allocating funds away from other things that won't because of that tax.
Correct.
Just wanted to make sure everybody knew that part.
Yep, thank you. Okay, so now the informal poll question is relative to internet access, and if the answer of the majority comes up with some or all, then we're going to get to the amount and how. So right now the question isn't about amounts or hows. It is just about, should the city provide some, all, or none of the funding? So option 1, no funding. Option 2, some funding. Option 3, all. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bros.
All funding.
Councilmember Clark.
All.
Councilmember Edens.
Some.
Councilmember Remy.
Some.
Councilmember Farmer.
All.
Councilmember Galani.
Some.
Councilmember McCune.
Some.
Is that some? Councilmember Rambo.
Sorry, all.
Councilmember McCutcheon. Councilmember Garitano.
Some.
Councilmember Flasher.
All.
Councilmember Jaxie.
All.
Councilmember Bertolino.
All.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Some.
Councilmember Nyan.
Some.
So we have a tie between some and all and 1 no. So what would be the approach you recommend, city attorney, in terms of the mayor breaking a tie on that?
Mayor, with this being an informal vote and not having a yes, no type answer, I think you could break the tie on this based on the tie that's presented to you.
Okay. Would there be any objection on the part of the council if I break the tie? So I'm going to vote some. So some is now before discussion for the council. And the next question is how much and from what source? Councilor McCutcheon.
From the city attorney. So how does this play into public and private funds? If the city puts funding into this enterprise and it's not for everyone in the city, and we're using tax dollars, but it's going to a private corporation basically that's providing the service. So how does that play in?
Well, as I understand it, the use of the funds is for a public purpose, which is providing what is essentially a utility to some, not necessarily all, residents of the city. And as long as there is a public purpose behind the expenditure of their funds, that is consistent with the Missouri Constitution.
Even if it doesn't go to every resident in the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Bertolino.
Yeah, I voted for all, and my rationale is that I think we need to take a very, very long-term view of this, not an either or what's going to get done next year, but long-term. And what I see on not on the internet, but also the watershed and the Chesterfield Lakes, we're talking about property values for our citizens. And if anything is sacrosanct here, I think it is the protection of property values. And if we don't provide internet access to the underserved or non-served areas, we're going to start losing property values, and that's going to hurt everybody. So I don't think we want to get into the sum process because unless that sum means federal dollars put in, not opposed to that, but to ask certain individuals within the city to pay amounts and others not pay amounts, I think is irrational. I think we have to look at it as a total city approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Dodwell.
Thank you, Mayor. I moved out here, golly, 24 years ago. There was no such thing as internet access out here, even on the east side of Wildwood. And as an IT person, I had to have an internet connection, some type of connection to be able to do the work that I did. When it turned into internet from the old modem days, I was able to contact 2 or 3 different companies myself, and I paid for Charter to dig a line up Strecker down into my subdivision to my house. And so I guess I'm a little confused as to why we couldn't set up some kind of mechanism where those individuals that do not have the infrastructure in place can set up a component that they pay for. My biggest concern with all of this is having the city of Wildwood own any component within it through any kind of negotiations that we might do, holds the city of Wildwood accountable for service and for ongoing maintenance of those activities. Even if we don't do them, that will be an ongoing bill to the city of Wildwood, potentially. And so I want to make sure that whatever we do with whatever provider, fiber I'm all for, because that does give you a more direct line and less latency, less interruption unless somebody backhoes over it or somebody digs in their yard and cuts it in half. But I just think we need to be very careful on issues. Number one, the city of Wildwood owning or taking responsibility for maintenance on any of this infrastructure, because that's not the business we're in. And then number two, giving individuals, I think families and households should have to pay for the implementation to their home to some extent. So not seeing all the numbers, not seeing the overall cost, not seeing any more details than we've gotten in the initial bid prospectus from those vendors that the Internet Access Committee has been narrowing down. I'm not going to say that we couldn't help with a little bit upfront cost, but long-term, I just want to make sure that we are not, as a city, in the business of providing internet. The city of Kirkwood provides their electrical power. Ask anybody in Kirkwood how consistent the performance is on their electrical power in the city of Kirkwood.
Councilmember Edens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason why I voted is just the very slim possibility of a federal grant. I wanted to understand if there would be part of an agreement, rent paid to us to help us recoup any costs out of profit after a number of years. And because I do think we need to explore a resident contribution for the drop line, not for the backbone. I'm gonna just throw this out there as an idea. Would it be possible not to have to suggest a specific number and range tonight that we would be willing to pay? I say this because for me, it entirely depends on what comes back during the negotiations for the bids. I might be willing to pay a lot more for one type of service with a better contract, you know, than I am for another. So I don't feel like I have all the information yet because we're still in the negotiation process to make a judgment about where I want to be between that 4 to 10 million. I'm just worried if we start throwing numbers out, we're going to get hung up in that process. And I don't want a bidder to drop out.
Joe, to follow up on Councilor Eden's question, when are we going to have something definitive in terms of a proposal that would fit the bill of what she just described?
I did receive a contact late Friday from CTC Technology and Energy. The negotiations have been begun. And I explained to Dr. Rambo today that I believe that we'll have something, at least in terms of an idea, hopefully before the end of March.
I'm sorry.
I guess my question to council and to you, Mr. Mayor, is could we drop a pin in it and revisit it after we get more info? No.
I so didn't understand your question.
Oh, just the phrase, can we drop a pin in it, like revisit it when we get more information from Mr. Vunich?
We could just postpone it if the council wants to do that.
I think that would be best.
So Joe, if it's the end of March, are you suggesting the next meeting, or would it need to be if the council wanted to do that, for the first meeting in April?
I'm not sure, Mr. Mayor. It's probably something that Mr. Cross and I would need to contact CTC Technology and Energy. I know that the first negotiation session was short. They basically expressed the interest of the city. They talked about general parameters and then set aside a time either this week or next week, I'm not 100% sure, to spend several hours trying to go through all the details. I'd like to think it would be by the 22nd, but I'm not 100% sure and wouldn't want to cause a problem.
You want to make a motion to postpone? So I'm assuming your motion would be to the first meeting in April to give ample time. Okay, we have a motion to postpone discussion of the degree of funding by the city, which was decided as some funding tentatively, just on a raw poll here, to the first meeting in April to allow, as Joanne responded, hopefully details of the specific plan from the companies we're discussing this with. Is there a second to the motion to postpone? Seconded by Councilmember Flasher. So now discussion is only on the motion to postpone. We had Councilmember Rambo first on postponement or something different.
I'm going to say something different.
Okay, Councilmember Brost on postponement or something different.
Postponement, I would say if we postpone the highest priority in the city, then I think we postpone everything until we circle back and address what is the most important item in the city. I think we can make progress and we should not postpone. But if we postpone number one, it's premature to discuss anything on this list.
Okay, you can amend the motion to postpone to do that if you want to do that.
Okay, I'll amend it. Well, if we're going to postpone, I would like to amend it to postpone everything until we settle what the most important item in the city.
Are you seconding that motion, Councilmember Garatano? Okay, so that motion, the motion's now on the floor. Councilmember Edens.
Yes, this is for you, Mr. Brost. I just want to clarify the motion. Are we just postponing the decision on the financial impact of the city, but we're still going to go through watershed and vote number 1, number 2, number 3, because we could still do that and just not put a number on anything. Okay.
We're done. We've got to make progress. We can't just keep going in circles. We've got to make progress, and that's just going in another circle.
Okay. So this is on, so the discussion now is on the amendment to the motion to postpone, which is whether to postpone everything of the 3 extraordinary items to the April first meeting of the council in April, or not. That's the issue. Councilmember Golani on that issue.
Yeah, as far as postponing it, if we postpone it, I don't know if this is another amendment, but can I suggest that, which I feel like this is something that we're continuing to ignore almost, but can we contact Starlink and get some details from them on exactly what their plans are for the rest of this year into early next year, costs, speeds, all of that stuff, because we're talking about prices and we've got CTC and a consultant working, but I feel like we're not paying attention to something that's a pretty relevant option.
If the motion to postpone as amended or not passes without objection, I'm sure that we could get that information provided to the council by the time it comes back first meeting in April. Councilmember McCutcheon. Okay, speaking against the amendment. Okay, so the Councilor McCune.
I just have a point of clarity from Councilmember Brost. So if his motion passes, are we trying to put a number together tonight? Is that what the amendment would include? So we would put some funding money to it?
If his motion passes, which is to postpone not just internet access, but discussion of funding the 3 extraordinary items, the other 2 being watershed erosion and Lake Chesterfield, that postponement would mean no discussion about funding or anything further takes place tonight. It would take place when it comes back.
Okay, thank you. I understand now. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Councilor Rose.
More information on internet than most of the items on this sheet, and we want to postpone it because we want more. If we postpone it, I don't think that we have more information on erosion, and I don't think we have more information on Lake Chesterfield. So, you know, I don't think we should postpone anything. But if we're going to put the big priority in the back seat, we have a lot of information, and technology is going to change tomorrow, and it's going to change the day after that. And the biggest risk for this city is that we continue to go in circles for the next 5 years and we don't make any progress. You know, it's time to act and it's time to move forward. So, but if we're going to kick the can down on internet, then yes, then I say just put all three off, but I don't want to do that. But we have more on internet than we have on the other two.
Want to hear?
No.
So, thank you.
Councilor Rambo, I see your hand. You still.
Sure, it wasn't on the amendment.
Okay, so the discussion should be only on whether to
Right,
postpone all.
so I'm holding.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call, but roll call vote on whether the postponement should be amended to include all three extraordinary items that we've discussed: watershed, internet, erosion, internet, and Lake Chesterfield, or not. And however this amendment is decided, we will then come back to the main motion to postpone. You'll get another vote on that. So this isn't to postpone. This is just what is being postponed. Okay. All right. Roll call vote on whether to postpone discussion of funding of all three of them or not. Yes vote is to include all three. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes, if we postpone.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
No.
Councilmember Dodwell,
No.
Councilmember Nian,
No.
Councilmember Bartoni,
No.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
No.
Councilmember Remy,
No.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Delaney,
No.
Councilmember McCune,
No.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
No.
Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
So the motion to amend fails. So we are now to the motion to postpone unamended, which was to postpone only discussion of the rural internet funding issue until the first meeting in April. Councilmember Garitano.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on this one right here. And I think that we should address the internet issue. Councilmember Bros said it best. I mean, there's been a lot of time, money, and volunteer hours put into figuring out the internet. And so the consultant cost the city $100,000 to produce the report. If I recall correctly, that was the amount. So I think there's been a lot of progress to get us to a point where we can at least try to move this forward. I think our residents that live in that area are asking for help. I think just in the past 2-3 weeks, I've already forwarded 3-4 emails to council members Rambo and Jaxi because they were in their wards. So I think these folks are getting tired of waiting, and
Are you speaking for postponement or against postponement?
I am against postponement.
Okay. Councilmember Flasher.
You might remember I was the second on the postponement, but Larry swayed me. So I'm going to be voting against the postponement myself. I just want to put that out there for the
Okay,
record.
thank you. Councilor McCutcheon.
Those that Mr. Bunich is looking into. So I think it would behoove us to wait and have a discussion until we have more information about possible funding. It's not saying that internet's not important. It's not putting it on the back burner. It's not saying it's less important than anything else. It's just saying we have additional information coming that may save the city some funding. And so we should wait until we get all of that information before we go ahead and decide what we're going to put forward. We don't even know what we're going to get for it yet.
Councilor Edens, anything new?
Just a rhetorical question. Why would I want to say whether or not I'm willing to put forward the full amount for the highest proposal and let the bidder know that if I'm trying to negotiate the cost down? What incentive would they have to drop the cost if I said today I'm willing to pay the full amount? That's why I don't want to do the vote.
Councilmember Bros.
To talk about the amount at all. I think we have to talk about our approach, and I think we have to talk about a method to get there. There's been possible funding for this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and there's going to be possible funding for it that comes up in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. This is a dynamic process. We have to work forward and be aware of the environment. You know, so no, I didn't anticipate getting into this detail, and we don't have to. I think we've talked already enough about the negotiations. We're talking about a framework, and we're trying to come up with a final answer. No, we're not there, but we do need to make progress. We need to point and go forward with this. We can't keep going back. So I wish everybody here was in all the, the internet meetings, and I assume everybody read all the proposals and that, but there's been a tremendous amount of work on this, and we're going back in circles. And that is damaging this city. There's thousands of people that need internet. I don't think there's a more important issue in this city. I mean, I thought about this. Maybe the formation of this city was the most important item that's happened in its history. And I think this is number 2. So thank you.
Thank you. What's your point of information?
Point of information was the only reason the motion is on the table is because the mayor asked us to indicate how much we would be willing to pay or what percent. I completely agree with you, Mr. Gross. That's the only reason I brought it up, is because we're not there yet for me to throw out how many millions I want to spend. So it sounds like you agree with me then, and then the motion would be supported. No? Okay.
Councilmember Dodwell.
I think to some extent, we're splitting hairs right now. And I appreciate everybody's concern about things, but don't we have this on our list as the highest priority? And so what are we voting on at this particular juncture, Mayor? Are we voting on paying for all of it, or paying for part of it, or none of it? Is that what we're voting on?
The motion that's on the floor at the moment is to postpone discussion of the funding aspect of rural internet to the first meeting in April.
I don't see any reason to postpone when we know it's our highest priority. We're not assigning any funding dollars. We're not assigning any funding resources to it. We need to continue to make it the top priority for the city, and that's what we're voting on right now.
Councilor.
I will echo what Councilmember Dodwell said. I mean, this is an informal poll, and we are splitting hairs here. And so the idea is it's to get an idea, whether we want to go all in, partial, or none as far as funding. We will have our opportunity when we see the actual proposals with the actual amounts, with the full breakdown and the detail. But I think to get this to move forward, we've got to figure out our position, where we stand.
So the motion can be withdrawn only with the unanimous consent of the council, because once a motion is made, it is the property of the full council. If any member of the council objects to the motion being withdrawn, a vote must be taken on the motion. Does any member of the council object to the motion to postpone being withdrawn? Seeing no objection, the motion is withdrawn. So we are now back. Well, Councilmember Remy, were you speaking on the motion to postpone, or I saw your hand? I'm sorry. I'm fine. Okay. All right. Councilmember Rambo.
Yes, thanks. I want to point out a couple of things. First, the solution on the table covers all the homes in the city. It's not, some folks, and they're counting on a high take rate so that they can make, maximum return on their investment. But they're committed to every home. The other thing, there are technical discussions to be had concerning Councilmember Dodwell's concerns, Councilmember Galani's concerns, et cetera. I am incapable of having concise discussions of highly technical topics that are near and dear to my heart, but I will say that there are experts on the REAC that have done this all to death. Everything that you all brought up as concerns. We always, in the industry, we say that a scalable dog is not a horse. And so the technologies that you're talking about, we don't want to bet on those as a community. This solution is future-proof. And so as you go, off and think about funding it, realize that we've come up with the best technical solution. Nothing on the horizon is going to change that. And it's just a matter of whether we're going to pay for it or figure out other methods to charge the consumers. That's it.
So I guess I'm just going to throw this out to hopefully facilitate the discussion and to explain my vote, which was to provide some of the funding. We currently, in terms of what the city has done relative to what has been known previously up to this point as the rural internet issue, when we put polls out, for example, those residents that those polls have served have willingly, and to my knowledge, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, without objection, paid a nominal license fee. How much is it, Joe, per month, roughly?
Each user pays $4.50 per quarter off the particular pole where they receive service.
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. How much?
I apologize. The user pays $4.50 per quarter for the pole where the service is received from.
Okay. So $4.50. And to my knowledge, there's never been an objection by any resident for that. I mean, I think they've been very excited and happy that they had the internet access that they did. So relative to what we do going forward, if, for example, the council were to decide that the city's funds that are supplied for this would be done with some type of mechanism for a return of all or substantially all of that over time, would almost be like issuing a bond. So the city puts the money up and the residents pay that back. My straw poll vote might change to full funding because we would, in essence, not be in effect spending as much taxpayer dollar on it.
That's exactly why I asked the question about some more, some or all or none. That's exactly right. And I don't think that there'd be a single objection to it from anyone to spend more than $4.50 a quarter to get actual good internet, particularly at the price point they're talking about, because it's represents a savings over charter and
which potentially would take care of a couple of things that I've heard from the council. The comment, and forgive me, I don't recall who made it, about philosophically thinking the city, it would be fine for the city to fund what I would call the back end of this up to the neighborhoods, but then I think it may have been Councilmember Dodwell, but then the residents that don't have it take over from there. It would, in my mind, essentially solve that problem because the city would be recouping the funds. And number two, Councilmember Eden's concern about giving up something during the middle of negotiation, I think it could potentially help the negotiation if the council took a position that this is what we're willing to do and the way that the deal would have to be structured to give guidance with respect to those negotiations. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily what all of you may want to do, but in my own mind, thinking this through over many years, I think that's something that our residents on the part of the city as a whole, whether they live in the rural areas or not, would find to be a palatable approach, and it could be a workable approach from the rural resident base as well. But I don't think, based on history and what we've done on a microcosm level, not as big as this, but on a microcosm level with the internet polls, has been done without objection. I think it's time
away from the technology, because this is the best shot that we have. and it's as future-proof as we can make it. Now it's time to decide how we can.
And to Councilmember Bros and your comment in that regard, and I alluded to this earlier, technology changes, and that's a risk in putting any money on this. But to a certain degree, the council and I face that with a lot of things that we do. There could be new and improved asphalt that doesn't break as quickly as the asphalt we just laid yesterday on a bridge, you know, or a better way. I mean, it happens, maybe not as fast as technology, but it happens. We have to make decisions based on what we have before us currently. And to Councilmember Brost's point relative to, you know, we have a lot of information on this, it's been studied and so forth. I do not disagree with that. And as much as I would like Councilmember Galani for, you know, and hope, frankly, that this happens, that we wake up tomorrow and that a company has figured out a panacea, for, you know, approach to this, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. I would love that. I know that we would all love that. As we sit here today, at some point we have to make this decision. And as we sit here today, we simply don't have that panacea. And so we have to look at what we have now and go from there. If the council makes a decision tonight or whenever to approve some funding or all funding for this, and before the implementation, or I would argue even in the midst of implementation, depending on when that happens, if new technology comes out, we can reconsider it and cut and move on.
I would say that there are really good reassurances that we could make about the technology. It's going to be the electronics and not the fiber, and there are all kinds of things, but it's a really big discussion. And I didn't want to even start it, but I would just reassure everyone that this is a low risk approach that's going to give us world-class connectivity into the future.
Councilor, thank you, Councilor Galani.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything you just said, Mayor. You know, and I too earlier said that I would be looking to potentially fund some versus all or none. You know, I also agree that this is a very important subject to the city and its residents and those that are looking to have this service. So, I mean, to your point of potentially structuring this to where the city would front all of the money over a certain amount of time or structured investment to have this put in place and implemented, and then have some type of licensing fee or recoupment process from those users that take advantage of it, to where the city could be made whole entirely or virtually thereof. I could definitely support that without a problem.
Councilor Nyan.
Well, I just have a general question based on what you just said, Mayor. As far as once we do choose the provider and have a contract with them, I'm assuming that that contract would be based on they're going to do it all over a period of years, not a couple of years. And now new technology comes out and we say, oh, wait a minute, we changed our mind. We don't want to fulfill that. I mean, I don't know. I know we don't have that contract, but maybe this is a question for Mr. Vunich. But I mean, would that be something that we could change halfway through and say, okay, you did this much and it's great, but now we have this new technology. We want to change course.
Joe Vunich, would you like to respond to that?
All of the proposals talk about a time frame between 2 and 2.5 years for complete rollout. That is inclusive of a citywide rollout by one of the providers.
Okay, but I think her question was, what if it's rolled out and technology changes and so forth? Is that going to be the responsibility of the provider to take care of updating its technology to make sure that the program remains viable for the long term?
Yes, CTC Technology and Energy will do as part of any agreement that not necessarily the fiber optic, which is the future-proof component of this internet service, but that the equipment that feeds it and directs it and basically propagates it will be able to be improved to keep pace with the demands of the internet. So that'll be part of the agreement.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Bros.
With respect to the, longevity of it, I think we're all here talking about this today because the geography of Wildwood did not present a viable business opportunity, and parts of Wildwood are served because it was profitable. I think what we're doing is we're basically providing funds to, say the final entity to essentially get Wildwood, connected and lit up. And I think in doing so, to me, underlying all of that is that we now have made it viable for a company to aggressively want to serve Wildwood. And the future proof of it, the equipment, all the ongoing maintenance and all that, I don't see us being involved in it at all. And honestly, I think part of the decision would be is that when I said earlier, one and done, I think as a city, we have to think about who we are and where we're going to be. But a long time ago, they made a decision to help out on internet. I think if we get to the point where we fund this and we have this opportunity, we're done. We are done. I don't think we continue to, we don't manage the telephone company. We don't manage, like the gas or any of that. And I think we move on. But right now we have to create a really an economic situation that creates competition. And that's what we did. We created competition. We got multiple bids. I think in general, I think there might've been a total of 7 and 8 at one time. So, I think that's really the end goal.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have 2 more, and then I'm going to ask you, Council, a question, or maybe one more. Councilor Clark, did I see your hand?
Yes. Just listening in on some of the meetings with CTC, I can assure you that they have done their homework. They have looked at this frontwards and backwards, and they have predicted with experts what's going to happen in the next few years. They don't just look at what's happening now and implement something based on the now. They are looking ahead, and they've got it covered. So I don't know if that gives you any comfort, but if you heard them talk, you would know they really are experts in this field. So if we have to, I like the fact that we're looking at the economics of it and the house values and all of that. But in my heart, I just keep thinking, yes, it's about the house values and it's about the economic, but it's the right thing to do to just move forward with this and give our people, our residents in this city, what the rest of the world has. Give them the internet. And so, I want us just to go forward and do it.
Councilor Remy.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I actually agree with what Ms. Clark said and what Mr. Rose said. I'm a little bit confused exactly what we're debating at the moment, but because I feel like we've been talking for a while about the same things. I said I was for some. I'm okay with all. I would just clarify that the 3 priorities in my book for this whole strategic planning, and they're not in any order, are internet access, revenue threats, and improvement of watersheds. All 3 of those are equally important. So I think we just have to take that in consideration when we're looking at a 3-year plan for $3.5 million. Because I think that someone's house falling into a creek or certainly losing revenue and not being able to do any of these things is important. But I'm all for it. If we've got a strategic plan to do this with all funding and then have it come back in some way, I'm totally for it.
Which leads me to the question, and thank you for your point about what is the discussion about at the moment. So I thought it might be helpful because these are things that are inevitably, when we have, I think we're still on track, but these points that have been made, they're all very good, and we're going to need to have them sooner or later in any event. But to your point, Councilor Remy, I'm going to kind of bring this back and see if I can get a feel of consensus on the part of the council. And this is my question. It only goes to those of you who voted some or none of the funding. So not those of you who voted all. We'll get to you in just a second with a different question. Those of you who voted some or all, would your vote, I'm sorry, some or none, there was 1 none, and the rest were some, would your decision move to all if as a component of what the city does, whatever that may be, with respect to the 4.5 for rural only or the 10 for citywide, would it change to all if there was a return component, as I described earlier, that we have done previously? And can you please list who those were that voted no or some? And we'll find out. Just 1 second. Yes, let's just go through the roll. Those that voted some or none.
Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Dodwell.
I would vote for all if we were able to recoup the costs.
Councilmember Nyan.
I would vote for all as well under those circumstances.
Councilmember Edens.
I would probably change to all if there was also a portion for drop lines, maybe for residents.
That's a yes.
Councilmember Remy.
There was a lot of asterisks after.
Nope, that's a yes. Move forward.
Councilmember Remy.
Yeah, I would change to all, but I'd have to, if it's on the 4.5 side, I think that would make me more likely to say all. If it's north of 10 million, I'm a little bit worried about expenditures and some of the other prioritizations that are to me equally important.
We'll take that as a yes at the moment as well.
Yep.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
Councilmember McCune.
Pass for just a second.
And then Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes, I would change it. I'm trying to recoup from it.
Councilor McCune, you bought yourself 5 seconds. What's your?
I didn't I? So I think I would consider it based on what was presented.
Okay. That was a yes, right?
Yes, based on
Okay.
what would be
We
presented.
have
yes.
unanimity on that. Now I have a question for those of you who voted for full funding, all funding. And please have that roll ready. Those of you who voted for all funding, would you have any objection if all or some of the funding from the city is recouped, as we have done historically on our internet polls, with a return of some degree from our residents on this program? That's the question. Please call the roll. Question is, for those of you who voted for all funding by the city, would you find it objectionable, yes or no, if that funding was recouped in total or in part from a charge that would be passed on to our residents? So in other words, the city would front the money as we did with the polls, but that money would then come back to the city. Okay, so a yes vote is you would be good with that, and a no vote is you don't want to do that. You just want the city to provide the funding. Please call the roll for those that voted yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxie.
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
We do have Councilmember Bartoni on here. He didn't vote.
We'll come back to Councilmember
Okay.
Bartoni in just a moment.
Okay, Councilmember Bros.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember Bravo.
Yes.
Okay, so Councilmember Bartoni, you came in after the vote on this was originally done, and that vote, just to bring you up to date, you probably already figured this out. I asked the council, it was an informal poll of on the rural internet issue only, what they thought they would like to do relative to funding. There were 3 options. The city provides all funding, the city provides some funding, the city provides no funding. And the vote came out as some funding. It was close between all or some. And by the way, I'm going to answer as a member of the some class that my vote would change to all as well. So just to give us full unanimity. But anyway, you weren't here. And so where we are now, based on what I've asked, those who voted some, and there was 1 no funding vote, and those who voted all, we now have consensus among everyone except for you, I believe, because you haven't been called on yet, as to whether, or as to the fact that the city will provide an amount of funding, and we're going to talk about at some point what that's going to be and what it's going to get for us and our residents. But the consensus we now have among 15 out of the 16 is that the city will provide funding as long as all or some of that is recouped from our residents, like we've done with our internet poles where they paid a small stipend over time to do that. Would you have any objection to that? Do you want to get on the bandwagon with this, Councilmember Bartoni?
So a couple questions. First, like if the city provides all the funding and recoups that, over what period of time would that be recouped?
We're going to cross those bridges when we know more and know what we're paying for and so forth. I'm trying to get philosophical consensus at this point. Imagine we're peeling an onion, and then at some point we're going to go to how much and the city pays and what it gets for that, and how much our residents pay and over what time. So right now it's just philosophically, are you in agreement?
Well, I mean, the one thing I've never been a fan of is the vote on hypothetical situations. I don't think any of us were elected for that. So I'm just going to abstain at this point because there's just not enough information.
So we have one abstention. So we have consensus on the part of the council, those that voted no and some, and those that voted all. The approach would be that the city will provide funding for the internet initiative and recoup that. Now, relative to the questions of how much and what we get for that, and I'm going to circle back to Councilmember Eden's suggestion earlier. I think, and we're going to follow what the council wants, but given where the negotiations stand, I think that our director of planning has enough information at this point to know that we are fully behind it, and that we're going to be moving this thing forward and how we're going to be moving it forward. And now it's going to come into the details of what that contract is going to say and what we're going to get for it and what the options are. So at this juncture, and I do share the reticence to not want to postpone this any longer, but for 3 weeks or so, I do think we would probably be having the next discussion in closed session as to what we're going to do, given that we're on the cusp, I believe, of getting this. And I'm just going to ask Joe Vinich relative to, and Joe, what I'm getting ready to ask you, I'm not asking because don't take this to mean that we haven't done this already to this point, but we are so close at this juncture. When I asked earlier about, needing this, or can we get this back in 3 weeks? This is hold feet to the fire, so to speak. If the council passes this, and I would ask you to make this clear to CTC, if the council passes what I'm going to suggest, which is a postponement of further discussion of this to further peel the onion in terms of what we're going to get, how much we're going to pay, and who it's going to be provided to, rural only or citywide, it's got to be 3 weeks or less. Do we have that deal?
I'll do the best I can, sir.
We take that as a yes as well. We got yeses all over the place tonight. Councilmember Brost.
I know the recoup is going to be a long discussion and the opportunity to do it. But, Mayor, I'm thinking is that we're not really at a postponement. We made tremendous progress and we're going to do more work as the contract comes in. Postponement sounds negative. I think we just had a wonderful discussion. I mean, I don't think we're postponing anything. We're letting it move along.
I didn't mean it literally. I just meant we just delay, because we could continue to peel the onion. I just don't know that it's advisable. So when I say postpone, I just mean continue the discussion. You can call it a recess, postpone, whatever. I agree with you. Postpone, we don't want to be negative. So I didn't mean it negative. I think it's very positive, and I would agree with you. We have made rapid progress on it. Councilmember Dodd.
Is it possible to just take this as the vote on the budget or the long-term goals and not get into the nitpickiness of details? We're not really voting tonight on how we're going to fund it and everything else. So
well, the minutes.
We leave it at the same level of expediency on our goals, and we're working on it in the background.
That's what we're doing. That's exactly, I think, what we're suggesting. And in terms of the vote, so we can, one of the ways the body can act is through the formal voting of yes and no. The other way that the body can act is through consensus. So a lot of times you'll hear me just ask, is there any objection to doing such and such and so on? So if there's no objection, that's a decision of the body by consensus. So what I think we have, and I would ask the minutes reflect this as a consensus of the body, is that as we asked the sums and the no's and we asked the alls, and all of us agreed, we have one abstention, Councilor Bartoni, but the body overwhelmingly agreed that with respect to the internet access issue, that the approach we will take, and we're going to peel the onion as to how we do it and what we get for it, once we get more information at the first meeting in April. But the consensus decision of the body is that the city will be, pick your word, advancing funding, providing funding, or whatever, and that all or some of that will be recouped, as we have with our internet initiatives previously, in terms of the poll outlays and so forth. So that's the decision of the body that we've reached. And that is huge. Yes, I agree. All right. Okay. So that big issue is done. Now, I would suggest, given that it's 6:26 and we have a couple of other items, that we move into the other items on our work session agenda, and in all likelihood come back to the same discussion that we had this evening on internet access at the next council meeting on watershed and Lake Chesterfield. And one of the benefits of that, aside from getting the rest of the work done this evening, is going to be that you can reflect on the conversation, the approach that we took tonight, because that's exactly the approach we'll take without objection from the council on the next two. Councilor Remy.
A bit out of left field, but is it possible to not talk about erosion at the next meeting? It's going to be the first meeting I can't make for the whole council for the last 2 years. And I'd like to be here for that discussion.
It's going to be what, I'm sorry?
I won't be able to be at that meeting.
I think that that would be fair. This is something that you have spearheaded, and I don't think there would be any objection from the council to that effect. And we've made rapid progress on strategic planning. So if there's no objection from any member of the council, we'll have the watershed erosion debate in terms of the thing we did tonight, funding, at the first meeting in April. Is that when you're going to be?
I will be here, absolutely.
All right. So is there any objection to postponing it for 30 days as opposed to 2 weeks for that purpose? Okay, fair enough. That's what we're going to do. All right. Council, thank you. Councilmember McCune.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Remy, but for Lake Chesterfield, I just don't want to waste the council's time any further, but I spoke to the board here at Lake Chesterfield. They saw the agenda, and I can give you names. They're not interested in any type of funding at this time from the city. They went a different direction after conversations with you, Mr. Mayor, that they don't want to entertain anything further. So I think it's a moot point to bring it in front of council at this time.
Okay, so that isn't before the council at this point. That's going to be decided by the council after the erosion issue is debated. And in the meantime, I'm going to reach out and talk further with the people on the board about a number of different things relative to that. I would respectfully suggest that, and again, I know you're summarizing what may have been decided by a lot of people, but I think that I'm at least going to want to be comfortable that they understand the options on the table and what is being discussed and what can be discussed before we simply remove this. And I guess I'm a little shocked that all of a sudden we're basically, I mean, that essentially takes one of the 8 out of place. So I don't know where that sort of came
And
from.
I agree. It just, they saw the agenda. I spoke to most of the members of the board and the Lake Committee discussing everything and the options for funding, and the options that you had presented with Mr. Kelp and other ideas from the city and the funding. They have their own funding and their own direction. They are in no position to make a decision, and they feel that it's not necessary.
With all due respect, they don't have funding to fix the lake. That's not true.
I've been on the board and I'm a resident. I'm very aware of what we have over here and what our options are,
And
sir.
you know they don't have the money to fix the lake. But anyway, I'll talk with the board.
It's
and we
not
can
what they
always
want to
come
do.
back And we can take that out if we want, but I want to have those discussions.
Yeah,
just to
if
make
you
sure
would
that they-
include me, that would be great since I'm the representative.
Okay, so is there any objection to moving into the next item on the work session agenda? All right, Joe, I think you have the next item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, and members of the City Council, at the latest Planning and Parks Committee meeting, the consultant, Human Nature, presented what was described as the preliminary master plan. The information relating to the preliminary master plan was forwarded to City Council by the Planning and Parks Committee. That particular item isn't for discussion tonight, but more for information. The item the department is seeking a action from the City Council tonight about relates to the final phase of the public input process. Originally, approximately 1 year ago, Human Nature, the consultant to the city, began this public process and has completed 2 phases. Up to this point, there's been almost 620 participants, and this final phase will conclude. Therefore, the committee reviewed the process, the steps in that process, and unanimously supported proceeding forward to this final phase of public input. With that, the Department of Planning is respectfully requesting, per the committee's action, that it have authorization by City Council to proceed and finalize the public input and then have the final plan. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garitano.
Yeah, I would be happy to make the motion that we go ahead and proceed with the recommendation as the Director of Planning mentioned. And I'll just add, it's a beautiful plan coming along really nicely. So I encourage, if you have not taken a look at that report and what they provided.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us to our last item under the action items, which is an executive session. We will need a motion to go into executive session with a roll call vote as required by applicable law, made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Galani. Roll call vote on the motion to proceed to executive session, please.
Councilmember Jaxi. Yes. Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Yes.
Councilmember Brooks.
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Remy.
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes.
Councilmember McCune.
Abstain.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon. Yes. Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Mayor. You can go in that room and you don't have to shut down.
So we're going to go into the community room, so we don't have to.
You don't have to log out. If you're going to go in the other room, you can leave your computer. You don't have to log out of the
You don't
meeting.
even just leave them like they are.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so council members, we are now back into the work session and we have one item left, which is a receipt and file PZ 11-20. Joe Vintage, do you want to provide any background relative to this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission completed its review of this particular application for a new fire station to be located in Ward 1 at the intersection of Wild Horse Creek Road and Netherton Road. After months of analysis and discussion with the support of the petitioner, in those analysis and discussion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial of the conditional use permit. The recommendation report before you tonight reflects that action. As with any conditional use permit, whether to grant an original or to amend an existing, the City Council has 15 days to exercise its power of review. If power of review is exercised, a public hearing must be scheduled on the matter. The department's available for any questions or comments. And I would note that Councilmember Brost and Mayor Bolin are part of the Planning and Zoning Commission and can add to tonight's discussion as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as with any receipt and file, as Joe mentioned, this is here in case the council decides it wants to review it. If you want to do that, you would need to decide that this evening because you have 15 days to do it. And if it isn't done this evening, then your 15-day period would expire. And so that would take a motion. Councilmember Edens.
Yes, I know we've all been presented with information. The time to debate the topic will in fact be later. But if you are interested in getting your questions answered as a council member or think you may want to vote for this in the future, I would ask you to support my motion. My motion is for council to exercise the power of review at least 30 days out in terms of a public hearing.
Okay, so we have a motion to review. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there a discussion on the motion to review the action of the P&Z Planning and Zoning Commission? We'll do a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Rainbow,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion carries. Moving next to adjournment of the work session. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? Made by Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Flasher. It's a non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn the work session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? So the work session of the council is adjourned. That takes us now at 7 o'clock. So we will move right into the main meeting of the council. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, March the 8th, 2021. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Gross, Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Remy,
Present.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember McCune,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember McCutcheon.
Thank you and welcome again, everyone. As I mentioned in the work session, it is so good to see you here in the council chambers this evening. For those of you who are comfortably able, if you would please stand with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes from the February 22, 2021 work session and regular meeting of the council. If there are no comments or questions on the minutes, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Made by Councilmember McCutcheon, seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Do we have speaker cards this evening? Okay, so moving into public participation. Before we get into that, I just want to mention a couple of things about it. Public comment is a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must complete a speaker card and provide it to the city clerk, who is seated to your left of the podium. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name and ward. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when the time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so, as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting. We may also post any responses on the City Council page of our website. And finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. That means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And I want to thank everyone in advance for following these. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Niles Stevens, wishing to comment about the harassment resolution.
Gotcha. Okay, just making sure I was on camera. All right, so I want to talk about the Niles Stevens, Ward 8. I want to talk about the resolution about harassment that's on the agenda for this evening. And I just think it's just really rich coming from this crowd, because you just settled a lawsuit and you paid a resident $300,000 because city leaders in the city of Wildwood harassed a resident no less than 6 times, trying to take away his First Amendment free speech rights. So I want to know, I would just have a question to the council. What are you going to do about this Tony Salvatore lawsuit? And before you say, well, it's settled, it's over, we paid him $300,000, I would just say that that's not good enough just to pay out the money and try to sweep this under the rug. The people responsible for this, I mean, if you think about this, this is the worst decision that's ever been made inside this building. This is the worst thing that can happen to a government, to try to take away someone's First Amendment free speech rights, because, without the right to speak, nothing that you do here matters. You're not a representative government if you're trying to take away someone's First Amendment free speech rights to speak out against what you're doing. So your zoning laws, Village Green, none of that matters if you don't have the First Amendment. If you poll Americans, the most important thing when they say, what do they love about this country? It's free speech, and it's the right to speak out against the government. And so what are you going to do about the Tony Salvatore having his First Amendment free speech rights taken from him? This is the worst chapter in the history of Wildwood. We've only been around for 25 years. So what are you going to do? Are you going to do like Ken Remy did and go to a ward meeting and just make a complete fabrication of the truth about contacting Tony Salvatore's attorneys? And I'm sorry, Ken, but as far as I'm concerned, you've disqualified yourself from public office. It's wrong what you did there. And I don't care if Kevin Dillard accepted your apology or not. You shouldn't be here after doing that and just complete fabrication of the truth. Everyone knows what happened in this lawsuit. It's all public record now. Every single person in here knows the wrong that was done to Tony Salvatore. We know that the city staff in a sworn deposition said what the mayor was asking people to do was immoral. So, I mean, Dan Flasher, you're the church guy, right? You a church leader. Would you allow people in your church to do things that are immoral and take away First Amendment free speech rights? I hope not. I wouldn't go to your church if you did that. I hope that you don't sit silence when you know what happened here. Mike Galani, you ran for office as a businessman. You're going to bring a businessman's approach to the city council. Would you allow your business leaders for the company that you work for to take away your First Amendment free speech rights and you not do anything about it and you let them stay in power? I hope not. I would not want to do business with your company. What about the rest of you? I mean, does anybody have anything to say about the money that has been wasted in this case? And before you say it's just an insurance matter and we just paid our insurance premium, we paid $30,000 to Hamilton Weber Law Firm. And this is the result that we get, a $300,000 settlement, one of the largest settlements in the history of First Amendment free speech rights cases was paid out by the city of Wildwood. And not only did we pay $30,000, that's just what we can prove. We've actually paid $800,000 to the Hamilton Weber Law Firm over 3 years. Our budget is only $680,000. We've overpaid them by $100,000. And this is the result, the largest First Amendment free speech settlement in my lifetime that I know of anyway. Hamilton Weber should be terminated immediately for their poor legal counsel over this Tony Salvatore lawsuit. Jim Bolin, you should ask him to resign. You should censure the mayor and you should ask him to resign for his role and his leadership in this case. The ACLU, typically the ACLU, they're lucky to get $100,000 in an apology. And in this case, a Wildwood resident got $300,000. And Tony Salvatore, he only came here. He came here, what was he asking for? He was asking for a couple $1,000s for his lawyer's fees and an apology. And this city council decided to fight him on it. And you ended up losing and you ended up paying the man $300,000. That is failed leadership on the part of Mayor Bolin, and you should hold him accountable for that. So before you pass a resolution on harassment, and you're talking about future
Mr.
harassment.
Stevens, how much more do you have?
should really
Mr. Stevens, how much more do you have?
I can go all night, really.
Well, you have 5 minutes and you're up. So if you can wrap it up in a few seconds.
Deal with the harassment that's already taken place. Deal with Hamilton Weber and Jim Bolin. They were directly involved in this case. It is a travesty. It is the worst thing that's happened in Wildwood City government in the 25 years of our existence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card.
I do not have any more speaker cards.
I'm sorry. I can't hear you.
There are individuals on Zoom that would like to speak.
Okay, before we do that, in response to the question of the council and me from Mr. Stevens, do we wait until all speakers have spoken, or is it appropriate to answer him at this point? Or does it matter? City Attorney Young.
It is appropriate to answer after all speakers have spoken. That's the code provides for, and that's what it says on the.
Okay, thank you. So following the conclusion of speakers, I will be making a remark about that in answer to his question. So who do we have, Julian, on Zoom that wishes to speak?
Mr. Mayor, we do have 19 individuals on Zoom right now. I would ask that any of those additional that would like to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or please write in the chat box if you'd like to be recognized. We also put that in the chat box. The one individual who has noted is Norbert Wilhaber with Stock and Associates for Bill 2601, and I will move him over right now.
Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? I am not, I'm speaking for the fourth bill. I did not intend to speak on whatever that gentleman was after.
I can't hear.
He said he was speaking on Bill 2601 instead of.
Okay, that's fine. Just go ahead and speak on the bill.
No. I'm here representing Stock and Associates for the plat after Bill 2601.
Okay,
I was
so
just
this is
trying to
public participation. Do you want to speak or not?
I do not want to speak. I'm here to answer questions about 2601 bill.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
There are no further hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So relative to the several comments made from former council member Stevens, relative to the Salvatore case, just briefly in response to his question. And first of all, I want to thank you for coming here, Mr. Stevens, and raising your points and your questions. And I'm particularly glad that you asked a question. In case you haven't seen it, I would refer you and any of our other residents to a presentation that I made. I think it starts at roughly 1 hour. At the Ward 3 meeting, it was taped and it's on the city's website. And it goes into great detail about the impetus for the lawsuit. And it includes voting records, including yours, that I think the public will find most interesting relative to that lawsuit. Thank you. All right, moving next to legislation, Bill 25.
Hey, Mayor, I have a question.
For the council for final passage, and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill?
Hey, Mayor. It's
Councilmember McCune.
Yeah, I had raised my hand before you started. I'm sorry if you didn't see my hand. So the public participation, I know that you named a bunch of people and asked some questions about the council. Under your comments that we can respond due to a question being asked. And I would like to just briefly respond if I can, as we normally do in public participation.
So you're responding to the question he asked?
Yes, and it was just pertaining to spending.
Okay, go ahead.
And I would like to pose it to the council. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so again, thank you, Niles, for bringing this up and to the council. I think that Mr. Stevens brought up some points and, I've been asking about the spending. So what I would just propose is that maybe we look at this just a little bit more and maybe start implementing changes that we can look at the spending and the concerns that he's brought up for future events. And I know that he asked all of us, what are we going to do about it? So I would just like to entertain, and Mr. Stevens, to answer your question, is to maybe get a discussion with the rest of the council members to maybe discuss this a little bit further and see if we can respond appropriately. So I appreciate your comments, and I just like to pose the question to the council at a later time to maybe open that back up so we can respond appropriately.
Okay, thank you. All right, my apology for not seeing your hand there. Moving into legislation, Bill 2598 is before the council for final passage, and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Garitano, second by Councilmember Flasher. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
We have one opposed, Councilmember Bartoni. Any other opposed? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2598.
I was opposed.
I'm sorry, Councilmember McCune is opposed.
Yeah, thank you.
That's okay. Councilmember Bartoni and Councilmember McCune opposed. And no abstentions. Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2598.
Bill 2598, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, submitting to the qualified voters of the city at the general municipal election to be held in the city on April 5th, 2022, a proposed amendment to subsection A of section 3.8 of the charter of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, as it relates to regular meetings of the city council. Second reading.
Thank you. And I think we may be having a motion to postpone. Councilmember Remy.
Yes, I would make a motion to postpone, I would like to make a motion to send this back to Admin Public Works up to a period of 60 days to work on some of the language of the bill as recommended by Mr. Young.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone. Is there a second to the motion to postpone? Made by Councilmember Farmer. And since I'm the one who raised this initially a few weeks ago or a month or so ago, I would support that motion for what it's worth, having had discussions with our city attorney and others. So the discussion on the floor is the motion to postpone. Is there any discussion on the motion to postpone? Councilor Bartoni, I see your hand. Are you on the motion to postpone or the main motion?
It was on the main motion, so you can I'll take my hand down.
Thank you. Councilmember Edens on the motion to postpone. Okay. Councilor McCune on the motion to postpone.
Yeah, should that be read a second reading on the agenda for?
Not if it's postponed.
Okay, but bringing it to the council should have said second reading?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
So on the agenda, it's saying it's up for second reading. So if we're going to postpone it, or we postpone it because it's under second reading, I think it should still be under the first. Am I right?
It was read it was already read once.
It was already read once.
So it is up for second. Okay, that's just a question. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you. All in favor of the, seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The bill is postponed as indicated in the motion. Moving next to Bill 2599, it's before the council for final passage and it concerns Ward 6. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Rambo, seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2599.
Bill 2599, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the consolidation of two existing lots of record, those properties being lots 1 and 2 of the Hawks Rest subdivision Plat 6, which are located in Section 7 and 18, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, and more specifically situated on the south side of Hawks Trail Road, west of Hawks Point Road, from now to be known as the Hawks Rest Plat 6 Consolidation Plat, second reading.
All right, thank you. Rick, do you have anything, I'm sorry, Joe, do you have anything you want to mention relative to Bill 2599?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, the bill's not changed since its introduction, and the department is available for any questions or comments. And I do have a colorized version of the plat if anyone would like to see it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Joe or any comments on the bill? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2599.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros, Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Remy,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember McCune,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yes.
Okay, the bill passes. Councilor Garitano.
Yeah, I do believe we had a resident who wanted to speak about internet, and I saw the comments earlier, and I think we kind of closed out public comment without noticing that. Is that possible that we could reopen public comment to allow that resident to speak? I'd hate to do that, but I don't know if the rules allow for that.
City Attorney Young.
Mayor, that would require a motion to suspend the rules, which would be a 2/3 vote of the council.
Okay, so we'd have a motion to suspend the rules, and I would ask if we make that motion that it's suspended relative only to the provision of public participation, and then we'll go back into public participation and come back on the agenda. Made by Councilmember Remy, seconded by Councilmember Garitano. This will be a 2/3 vote. All in favor of the motion to suspend the rules for that purpose only, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Julian, can we please have the speaker moved over?
Yes, sir. We are moving over Sean Oberreiter right now.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
And Mr. Oberreiter, were you online when you when I went through the few little rules we have on public participation? Did you hear those?
I did.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Go ahead.
I did. Thank you. Unfortunately, my connection is not the best, which is part of my issue. So I live in Shiloh. Actually followed the issue now for many, many years. I actually stood in front of this panel or folks like you previously when Wildwood invested $1 million previously. And at that time, I shared that my family spends about $800 a month on internet. We still do that today. We still today have to send our children to friends' homes to do their homework or to go sit in their cars outside of restaurants where they can tap into the restaurant's internet. It was disheartening when 500 homes, including many individuals on the panel, were boasting how wonderful the internet service was that they got years ago as a part of those 500 homes. It was disheartening when my children and I walked the neighborhood handing out flyers saying, here's a new service coming into Wildwood, sign up for it. And we saw neighbors getting that service because they were at the top of the hill. They could get the signal from the pole that was put up years ago. So my family has invested in the hope of getting internet. So it was a little frustrating when we invested our dollars out of our own pockets to have the cable run to our home, to find that it's being stalled because of whatever reason, whether it's just not having a new pole put up or what have you. We've been on the phone many times with Bay asking them, can you do something? Can you put where they piggyback off of one house to the other? Well, we can't do that. We feel like we've gone above and beyond on this topic. And so I'm at a point where I'm looking at saying, folks, come live in our neighborhood where you don't get internet, a basic service. Live in the pandemic world right now where you don't have basic service to do this video or do just simple things on the internet. Or you pay an $800 a month bill because you're using your hotspot. I can assure you, you'll think about this topic every month when you write that check. So all I'm asking for, very politely, because I asked the last mayor the same thing, when you have to write that check, I think you'll have a little bit more sense of urgency around this topic, because all of us deserve to have the same luxury that each one of you have in your home today. So if you can apply a little bit of pressure to AT&T or whomever it is to get a pole put up so the rest of us can have the same enjoyment that each of you have, if you live in a area that's getting internet, I would appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
And do we have any others? No. All right. Thank you again. Appreciate your comments. Moving back into the agenda of the council as it was presented and posted. New business first readings. Bill 2600 is before the council and it concerns 3 wards, wards 1, 6, and 8. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark. 1, 6, and 8. Seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
I'm sorry, didn't give you enough time. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2600.
Bill 2600, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a contract on behalf of the city with NB West Contracting Company for the resurfacing of various public streets within the city, including traffic control and other incidental items as shown on the construction drawings and specifications. First reading.
Thank you. Rick, do you have anything you want to add to the information the council's been provided with respect to this bill?
Mr. Mayor, no, I do not, but of course, the department is available for any questions from the city council.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Rick or any comments? All right, seeing none, the bill will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. Moving to Bill 2601, it's also before the council for first reading and concerns Ward 1. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2601.
Bill 2601, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing a boundary adjustment plat that will result in the reconfiguration of 2 lots identified as adjusted lots A1 and B1 of the boundary adjustment plat of lots A and B and part of U.S. Survey 132 recorded in Plat Book 369, page 9, all being part of Township 43 North, Range 3 East of the 5th Principal Meridian, more specifically located on the west side of North Etherton Road, north of Centaur Road, Chesterfield Valley area, which will hereafter be known as Boundary Adjustment Plat of Adjusted Lots A and B in U.S. Survey 132, first reading.
Thank you. Joe, anything further you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2601?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Mr. Jacquin for sharing the screen. The particular boundary adjustment involves fixed supply service and the adjoining property owner, a gentleman named Mr. Gerhard. Mr. Fick recently purchased an additional 10 acres on the southwestern tip of the property, and he has proceeded forward under contract to purchase an additional 10 acres from Mr. Gerhard. That 10 acres that will be transferring is outlined in the green dashed line, and the arrows show the transfer to the larger tract. At the conclusion of this boundary adjustment plat, Mr. Fick will own 41 acres. If there are any questions or comments, I'd be glad to answer them at this time. I would also note, Mr. Mayor, the gentleman from Stock and Associates is also available for questions or comments.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe relative to the boundary adjustment? All right, seeing none, it'll be on the council's agenda for the next meeting. Moving finally, first readings to Bill 2602, and it concerns Ward 2. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Ward 2. Councilmember Edens makes the motion. Is there a second? Councilmember Bartoni. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2602.
Bill 2602, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing a replacement deposit agreement with extensions of the associated letters of credit, which are made part hereof and attached hereto for the Britton Woods subdivision, a 12-lot residential subdivision located in the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 23, Township 45 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, and more specifically situated on the north and south sides of Orville Road, east of State Route 109, first reading.
Okay, thank you. Joe, relative to Bill 2602, do you have anything further you'd like to mention? I can't hear Joe.
Pardon, sir?
I think you're on mute. You need to start over now.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, my apologies.
That's all right.
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, Breetown Woods is a 12-lot residential subdivision developed in the NU non-urban resident district. All of the lots are 3 acres in size or greater. The original plat was approved in 2009. Given circumstances, there are still vacant lots associated with Breetown Woods subdivision. As such, the letters of credit are about to expire, and the deposit agreement, which was replaced, is already in default. To continue forward, the Maselli Development Company has agreed to do a replacement deposit agreement with new letters of credit that will continue the obligation of the developer until the subdivision is completed. If there are any questions, the department will be glad to answer them at this time. Thank you.
So Joe, there's no objection from you or the subdivision for this action, I take it?
The department is trying to maintain the current developer as the responsible party for all subdivision improvements and their completion. If the letters of credit are allowed to expire, or if the city were to call the letters of credit, the city would become the development entity for the subdivision, which is probably not the best approach for all parties. I will tell you that there are some ongoing issues in Breetown Woods subdivision relating to the homeowners association, and those issues I hope to help resolve with this particular process as the start. and bring a conclusion to the subdivision sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Joe or comments on Bill 2602? All right,
Thank you
seeing none,
again.
it will also be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. That takes us into resolutions. We have one that is not on the consent agenda, Resolution 2021-10. Before the council, it concerns all wards. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-10? Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Ms. Eldridge, please read the resolution.
Resolution 2021-10, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, amending Resolution number 2021-5 and providing for the refund and waiver of certain liquor license fees for 2020 and 2021 license years.
Okay, thank you. And you may recall, council members, this resolution arises out of the extensive discussion that was held at the last council meeting. Is there anything further any of you wish to mention about it before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor of Resolution 2021-10, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I oppose.
We have one opposed, Councilmember McCune. Any abstentions? All right, the resolution passes. That takes us to the consent agenda. There are 3 items that I placed there. As I mentioned at the previous council meeting, if any member of the council wishes to remove for discussion and separate vote any of the 3 items, we can do that. These include an appointment of Ms. Joanne Desher from Ward 4, moving her up to from an alternate position to a full voting position on the Board of Ethics. That position has come open by virtue of Michael Garrett's resignation. The second on the consent agenda is Resolution 2021-6, which is the harassment policy. And the last is Resolution 2021-9, which relates to the landscaping contract. So if any member of the council would like to separately discuss any of these items, we can do that. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion, which would be a single motion to approve all 3 en masse, and there will be 1 vote for all 3. Councilmember
Mayor, I would like to move one out. I don't know if you see me.
Hold on. Councilmember McCune.
I would like to further clarify the anti-harassment proposed amendment discussion or comment. I don't know if you need to move it out to kind of just ask some questions. I don't know how you want to proceed, but I do have some concerns.
What are your questions? And we'll see kind of how the discussion goes.
So with appointed officials, so I just have a couple headers that I can, it's probably City Attorney Young that's going to have to answer these. How on the actual thing that why does this follow under Title VII for protection was my first question. Is it different because elected officials and appointed officials are not employees? So is it handled differently when it comes to procedure of law or procedures if there was a claim? And my third question is I have a problem with the language. If, for an example, I was to claim sexual harassment against somebody on the council as a council member, why would I contact the city attorney if I didn't want to contact the city administrator? Because the city attorney represents the city, and most cases for sexual harassment are against an employer or a city. So why would I show my cards as a victim to the opposing people that could potentially be part of my lawsuit? Why don't we say that you contact the EEOC directly instead of giving due process instructions that probably wouldn't be relative to an individual's case like myself? So
Okay.
I guess I just have those questions.
Councilmember Kuhn, let's let him answer your question, and then you can expand. So
Okay.
you want to answer those, please, City Attorney Young?
Well, just.
Can you take your mask off? I can't hear you. Thank you.
I believe you had 3 different questions. I'm going to try to address each one of them independently.
I can't hear you.
We can't hear you, John.
You're full blasted.
Is this any better?
A little bit.
Okay. So to answer your individual question, first, is this intended to address Title VII issues? No, it's not intended to address Title VII issues. Why addressed to elected and appointed officials and not employees? The reason for that is the employees are already addressed in Personnel Policies and Procedures Manual, which by its specific language does not apply to elected officials or to appointed officials who are not employees of the city. Second, your third question, and I want to make sure I understand what the question is why, bring it to the point of the city attorney when you may be filing a suit. The intention here is that, as you may know, and as we're asking the case, that you have to at least complain about it. You can't bring a lawsuit. So the idea here is to bring it to the attention of the city so that they can make some corrective actions to correct the behavior, so it doesn't get to the level of a lawsuit. If you already have a lawsuit, that's a whole separate issue.
And I guess I would just add, her question included, why not have them file it with the EEOC? That's administratively encouraging someone to immediately, basically, it's not a civil suit, but it's tantamount to that. So you would in essence be encouraging someone to initiate proceedings before it's actually been investigated, because that's what the EEOC does, correct?
Yeah, correct. That is correct. The idea here is to allow the city the opportunity to have a process to ensure the way complaints files, the city can take corrective action.
Ergo the policy.
But I just have a further follow-up. So just a two-part question, Mr. Young. So like I said, I just have a concern. I understand the EEOC comment, Mayor, but my concern is that you do represent the city. And if I did have a claim, why would I tell you my claim as the city attorney who would represent us or the special prosecutor?
So Councilor McCune, he's answered that, and his answer isn't going to change.
I wasn't clear on the answer.
You want to answer it again, please?
Sure. The answer is you're not telling me what your claim is. You're complaining of behavior that you want corrected. That's the entire point of the policy.
Okay. And then my last question to you was the language about slurring each other. I guess we've seen this in social media before. How do we, wouldn't it violate a free speech again with parody? How does parody is protected? And for political figures, I mean, it goes way back in time. So if I wanted to put up a cartoon character, which we've seen in the past as an example, it's protected. So right now, this anti-harassment policy saying you can't do that. So are we running into another free speech problem here?
No, I don't believe you do. The intent of it is for slurring someone based upon their particular characteristics, which of course is strictly very clearly said is not in an employment context. Or in the context of a workplace of work, it's protected speech.
Okay, so parody is not, I mean, we're not going to run into a problem from the city is what I'm asking. So if I put up a cartoon character about somebody here and it's kind of questionable on what the visual is as a political pun under a parody, does that violate, are you going to say that we're going to go up against this policy?
Councilmember, in terms of the specifics, I'd have to know, obviously, there's a very specific. But if you say, if you say purely political speech, that's a whole different issue. If you are harassing an employee and you are harassing them based upon their protected characteristic.
Now, let's just cut to the chase. Is there anything in the policy that you prepare that you believe runs afoul of constitutionally protected free speech or that would encourage the violation of constitutionally protected free speech?
No.
Thank you.
No.
So Councilor McCune, if you plan, and there's no right or wrong answer to this, I just need to know how to handle it procedurally. If you plan to vote against this or abstain, rather than voting for this policy, I'm going to pull it off so you have the ability to do that. Do you want me to do that? Or are you prepared to vote in favor of it?
I'm going to vote not in favor of it.
Okay, and we're going to pull resolution 2021-6 out of consent. We'll handle that separately. That leaves two items, the appointment of Ms. Desher and the native landscape. Is there any objection to handling those in unison? Seeing none, I believe Councilor McCutcheon, you were going to make a motion to approve those collectively. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? For the benefit of the public, Ms. Eldridge, would you please read resolution 2021-9 just for their information?
Resolution 2021-9, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a contract on behalf of the City of Wildwood with Native Landscape Solutions Incorporated for the maintenance of native landscaping areas within the City of Wildwood.
Okay, thank you. And finally, that takes us to the resolution that was pulled from the consent agenda, Resolution 2021-6. It is before the council. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2021-6 made by Councilmember McCutcheon, seconded by Councilmember Edens? Ms. Eldridge, please read Resolution 2021-6.
Resolution 2021-6, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, adopting an anti-harassment policy for elected and appointed officials.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on Resolution 2021-6? Councilmember Edens?
Yeah, look, there are certain gaps in how we have the ability right now to hold ourselves accountable for our actions to one another and to staff. Because what we have on the books applies to staff and not to us. This has been ping-ponged around and ping-ponged around. It should have been done a year ago. We need it now. And I am telling you from personal experience that we need this done. And if I need to make another argument for it, I'll have it come to Jesus publicly. I don't want to go there, but I'm telling you, there is a gap. We need it passed. And I think it takes a lot of nerve tonight to conflate free speech with a sexual harassment policy and a harassment policy, and I'm not putting up with it. I'm so irritated, and I'm sorry. I'm trying not to get emotional, but I'm telling you right now, I have personal experience, and we need this.
Thank you. Councilor McCune, anything new?
Yeah, if Miss Edens wants to expound on it, so we have a full understanding of what your argument is. Did we have a problem and this is why it's bringing forward? Because I never saw an email that we had an issue and why we brought it. So if you want to reserve yourself, that's fine. I'm not trying to call you out. You offered it. So I'm asking if you want to divulge in it. My purpose was asking questions for clarifications only, because there is laws and other remedies. So there is a difference between employees and city council members. I don't debate that needs to be done. I'm a female and I'm in employment law. I get it. But I was just questioning some of the clauses and how we do the reporting. So I'm not against it.
When you say employment law, what are you in employment law?
I've worked in employment law. So my concern
As
is.
a lawyer or as something else?
I never claimed I was a lawyer, sir.
Okay.
I said I've worked in it. So I didn't say that I was. So you're clear. There's no ethical violation here. I never claimed to be an attorney, for the record, or give legal advice. So you're aware of that as well. But what I am saying is that, Lauren, is my problem is just the procedure of reporting. I had concerns of that because I see lawsuits, and we're going to give it to a city attorney to voice your complaint that could be dismissed. And I don't like it. So I just didn't feel comfortable with the language. So I questioned it.
And I don't think it's going to be foregone that just because reporting is there, just we don't misrepresent this to the public. There's nothing in the policy that says, and I think there are probably provisions that would not allow this, simply because it's reported to the city attorney that's automatically dismissed, with all due respect. Councilmember Remy?
Yes, can I call the question?
Seeing no further speakers, I think that would be a moot issue, but thank you for asking about that. So the question was called, but I don't think we need that. So seeing no further discussion, all in favor of Resolution 2021-6, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed?
Abstain for the procedures.
Okay. Any abstentions? Councilmember McCune abstains. All right, thank you, and thank you for your comments. All right, that takes us. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So we can handle that by consensus, can we not? We can handle that by consensus. Okay, so my apology. There was actually, you may recall at the last meeting, comments from Councilmember Clark that related to a specific part of the policy that the city attorney presumably worked with her on and presented to you this evening. And so technically, it would be an amendment to the resolution that was presented. However, We can do that, as I mentioned earlier, we can do things by consensus. So is there any objection to including the amended language, the amended version that was brought about by that discussion at the last council meeting and it had to do with people with disabilities? So is there any objection for that language to be the operative language in the policy? Councilmember Kuhn, do you have any objection to that?
Her language was fine. It's just the procedure.
I'm sorry?
Her language is fine. I just have problems with the procedure.
I understand. I just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Seeing none, by consensus, that will be the resolution that was passed by the council. All right. Anything under miscellaneous from anyone before we go to adjourn? Back on our work, Councilmember.
I will say, I want to commend you really for just the way you're handling the prioritization process. The way you're threading that is exceptionally well. And I really don't take the time to thank you for doing that because it's been a long process. And of course, everyone else that's been involved. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would like to thank all of you as part of the team because it's been as enjoyable for me as it is for you. So we get there together. All right. Seeing nothing further, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Garetano, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you so